The intentional investors are fantastic. They understand the long-term approach. I find it's the accidental investors who get stung and they find it a challenging process. So I think approaching it with a business mindset can set them up for the future and ensure that it's not a stressful, horrible experience.
Well, that's a common mistake made by many property investors. Bushy Martin and Sky Taylor talk about how to avoid doing it. Also this week, award-winning property consultant Brett Wheatland details how to find properties that will have the highest tenant appeal. But before we start, I want to thank our supporters and content partners, realty.com.au, BMT Tax Depreciation, Know How Property Finance, Get Rare Property, and Apiro Marketing. And don't forget, you're going to find us on all podcast players, the Property Hub, Southern Cross Oz Stereo Network, Hot Copper, and all socials as the Property Hub Collective.
Property deductions can save you thousands of dollars each year. To make sure you maximise deductions, you need to work with the most experienced quantity surveyor in the country. BMT Tax Depreciation is the leading specialist in the industry. They've completed over 700,000 tax deduction schedules for residential investment and commercial properties Australia-wide. BMT guarantee to find double your fee in the first full financial year deductions. Call BMT on 1300 728 726 today for an obligation-free quote. Realty Talk and your host, Bushy Martin.
Now, when it comes to landlord investment properties, I'm always hearing the complaint about repair costs and bills, as if it's some sort of an annoyance that just shouldn't be happening. I mean, investment properties are meant to be set and forget, aren't they? Well, this common misconception is because most investors just don't treat their property like a business. But what does this really mean? Well, to unpack this, we're joined by Sky Taylor, the boutique owner of Adelaide agency Tailored Property Management, a 2-decade property veteran who focuses on educating investors on innovations and improving efficiency. So welcome back to the show, Sky.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Sky, from your experience, how do you see most investor landlords viewing their properties?
I think there's two different types of investors. I think we have the intentional investors who go and purchase a property. They're very intentional about what they want to achieve with that property. Then the other camp, we have the accidental investor. So perhaps they move out of a home into a bigger one and they keep it, rent it out. They might move in with a partner. They might inherit a property. How each investor approaches property investing can be quite different. The intentional investors are fantastic. They understand the long-term approach. I find it's the accidental investors who get stung and they find it a challenging process. So I think approaching it with a business mindset can set them up for the future and ensure that it's not a stressful, horrible experience.
Very good point. Well, I guess given there are quite a number of accidental investors who almost fall into it, whether they're keeping a house that they've sold or inherited one or what have you. So given that different approach, what are the downsides of this outlook that you see in practice?
The downside of being an accidental investor.
Yeah, and not treating it as a business, so more as an annoyance, as I mentioned in the opening.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the downside, is that this isn't an enjoyable experience. That why would you invest in property? This is frustrating, it's painful. It also has an impact on the tenants because perhaps the accidental investor isn't maintaining the property as they should. And so tenants are turning over more often than you'd like. So it can have a really broad impact on both landlords and tenants. And if they are finding the process frustrating, they may not remain in it as long as they should. We know real estate is a long-term game.
Very good points. So why should investors then, both accidental and intentional, treat their properties like a business? And as I mentioned in the opening again, what does that actually mean?
And I think that probably comes back to my long-term comment that we all know we hold real estate long enough. That's where all the gains and the growth is. And that's why we get into property investment. So if we are taking a long-term approach and we're looking at preventative maintenance plans, we're looking at ensuring we have a slush fund to deal with the maintenance that comes up, the repairs that are necessary. It's not a financial hit on the family who are also trying to maintain their own property. It's really about being proactive and not reactive. That's really will make all the difference in the property investment experience for landlords.
Yeah, well said. Now, for those uninitiated and a lot of the accidental investors, can you spell out what's entailed in a preventative maintenance plan for those that don't understand much about it?
And I think it can vary, but depending on how deep the landlord wants to go into it, but it can look at what do we need to be spending in the next 3 years? What do we need to be upgrading in the next 12 months? And taking that approach as to where your costs will be coming at so you can prepare for it. That's how I would tackle a preventative maintenance plan. It's not about repairing a leaky tap. It's okay, what needs to be invested to ensure that we're not then dealing with emergencies and we're not dealing with problems down the track because we know this might come up in the future, and really having a budget for that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, making sure that when you're doing your cash flow analysis to look at what the true costs are, you actually allocate funds for that, and the sort of rainy day reserves that you mentioned earlier are therefore there to cover it, and there's no surprise and not chewing into hard-earned salary or their limited savings when something does occur. So, no, awesome. I guess you've touched on some of this already, but what are the benefits of treating an investment property like a business from where you sit?
It's definitely about having higher returns at the end of the day. We might purchase property for a capital growth perspective, but you want to maximize your returns for that holding period. So ensuring that we're not throwing money away on things that won't generate a return on investment. And that's where thinking forward as to what you should be investing your money into in terms of maintaining that property is about having that plan in place to make sure that your returns are maximised by not wasting money on things that don't need to be done.
Yeah, no, very well said. Now, I can almost hear a lot of the accidental investors listening into this today, Sky, thinking, oh, this all sounds like way too much extra work, particularly when I'm time poor. So how can that be overcome?
And I certainly don't want our accidental investors to think that way. And we love the accidental investors because it should be a good experience for them. And having an experienced property manager, I hate to say it because I'm biased, but having an experienced property manager will make all the difference. Someone who can take a strategic approach and understand the journey and the goals that each investor is on, because everyone has different goals and different times that they want to stay in the market. And I think that will make all the difference that's why you have quality property management to take care of this for you, but you need to both be on the same page about where that journey is going.
Yeah, a very good point. And let's face it, a good property manager is going to be on top of what things cost and how often they're likely to break down and how much you therefore need to budget. And they've also got access to the trades that provide quality work that are going to enable you to keep the property prim and proper. And they're also comparing properties all the time because they're looking at your property in the context of what's happening elsewhere, so they can give you really positive feedback on what you need to be doing to keep abreast of it and achieve that maximum rental return. So I guess, the takeaway for me is that it doesn't matter what sort of investor you are, if it's a two-way communication with your property manager, so you're taking on board their level of expertise and experience and hands-on involvement in the industry to position your property to operate its best, both from a rental and a long-term resale perspective, then you've got the best of both worlds. So look, thanks for reinforcing this need to treat our investment properties as a business, Sky. And I really want to thank you for your very valuable time and sharing all of this with us on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Successful property investment is a game of finance. Do you have the right team and the right game plan? Realty Talk is brought to you by Know How Property. More than mortgage brokers, Bushy Martin and his team of investment architects set you up with a sustainable strategy structured to lower your costs, tax, risk and stress while increasing your capacity for growth. Know-how has helped over 1,900 homeowners and investors secure more than $800 million in property wealth. So get set to live more, work less, and live your legacy. Want to know how to invest in your freedom? Visit knowhowproperty.com.au.
This is Realty Talk, powered by realty.com.au.
Now, if you want to be a sustainably successful investor with rental properties, you need to secure property types, locations, profiles, and price points that actually have the highest tenant appeal. Because it's the tenants that pay the rent, that pays your loans and costs, that then allow you to create your wealth long term. So it's all about tenant quality and appeal, and this can actually change and evolve over time. So to find out what tenant trends are being experienced on the ground and how this is likely to affect you as an investor landlord, we're joined by Brett Wheatland, an award-winning property management consultant with over 23 years of experience, and he's also the general manager of a specialised property management agency, Renting Adelaide. So welcome back to Realty Talk, Brett.
Thanks for having me again.
But looking forward to diving into this one because, again, it's an area that a lot of investors don't spend a lot of time thinking about. But to sort of get into the guts of it, sort of what changes and trends are you seeing emerge with the types of tenants that you're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, we've seen I guess, a logical shift in the direction of a lot of new people coming into our country, and obviously South Australia. There's been a big draw card here as an affordable state. We've seen people shifting for employment, but also affordability. And a lot of new arrivals that are coming from abroad, skilled people with, a lot of government assistance in getting our population up to where it needs to be to build these properties we need. Yep. And I guess with that, we're sort of just seeing a bit of change in how we look at processing applications and the types of tenants that we are bending and flexing to meet to get into these properties so we can fill these vacancies as quickly as possible.
Well, I'd love for you to sort of unpack if you're seeing any trends in relation to the sort of level of tenant inquiries, the amount of engagement and open home tenants, and if so, what are you concluding from all of that?
Yeah, it's actually been a really interesting thing to delve into, looking back on the data, which I don't think we've done much of an industry to date, because we're now just starting to work out where's all this coming from and where's it all going to, so we can better target things. So we are seeing a lot of inquiries still coming through, but we are noticing that people are sort of a bit panicky about finding a rental property. So they will inquire for a ton of properties. They'll get their open inspection times in front of their face, and then they'll determine which ones out of priority they'll need to rock up to. So let's say you get 100 inquiries for any property, you may only end up with 10 or 15 people coming through that fit that niche, and then from there you might only end up with a couple of applications, simply because they are shopping around. So they are looking at as many properties as they possibly can. They are putting their application in as many properties as they can, but obviously a lot of them are not they're dead end inquiries as well. So it's a bit of a panic station out there in that respect. And the amount of engagement we need in order to get ourselves just one or two applications across the line is quite phenomenal, to be honest.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of work to get a result. I'd love to sort of dig into the tenant application process a little bit more if we can, and get you to sort of expand on some of the challenges that are emerging on top of what you've already touched on.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the things. We've obviously shifted very much into a digital space in that world of tenant applications, so a lot of automation in the way of processing references, etc. That I think it's an evolving marketplace in itself, because it needs to start tapping into things like AI, where it can start pulling other information or read between the lines, because tenants are of course coming across from the other side of the world, and English is not their first language. So putting a significant piece of technology with a large volume of documentation in front of them, under pressure, competing against other people in the same boat, or even in the local market, is really quite challenging. I wouldn't want to be having to go through it myself personally. Just understanding things like terminology, what's a rental ledger, and without that information, they're not getting through the door, because that is really, really crucial. There's a few obviously touch points that we must have as a property manager and as a landlord. You want to know that they've got ability to pay rent, that they've got a reasonably static, track history, not a dodgy one, and even to be able to pull all that information together coming into Australia, and trying to understand all these terminologies in one application, would be an absolute challenge, hugely.
Be very daunting. I guess from a property management and a landlord perspective, though, trying to get decent referees and references is going to be a real challenge as well. Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, correct. So I think that's one of the challenges, is that obviously what we call as a local market, those people that have been in the rental market and have been renting, or they may have been homeowners, they've got a bit of history. They might have that 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And obviously those people with greater history, be that financial or rental or ownership, are going to have a much better chance of securing a property over someone that doesn't have either any history at all or very, very minimal history. Even though they may be the most amazing tenants, we're relying on a sort of limited amount of documentation and information to make a decision as to who's going to be the best person to rent a house. And as an investor, as a property manager, and our job as a property manager, you need to make sure you pick the best quality tenant, because it's going to probably fall back on your desk if it goes balls up. So it really is putting the crunch on those people that don't have that rental history behind them, or have limited information or resources to prove where they've come from and their journey going forward, because it is a much higher risk to take on an unknown tenant than it is someone that's got the history. And there's one thing I often say when I speak to investors and our clients when they talk about these situations, even so tenants that ring us and they think, I can't get a house, what do I do? Yeah. We always just say good tenants get good properties. So if you've got that rental history, then you're not going to have any problems finding a property, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But we like to flex a little too, because everyone needs that first opportunity to break. So I think one of those challenges going forward is going to be filling in that gap, whether that's technology or just that human interaction of talking to these applicants and getting a feel for it. I think that's playing a bigger role for what we do in property management now. It's not just about what's on that paper.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think it's a bit like the old story when you try to get your first job. Everyone's looking for experience, but you can't get any until you get the job. It's no different for someone coming into the country trying to get their first rental, because they've got nothing to show you about what their history has been. So there's going to be a leap of faith from both sides of the fence there, I think, initially, and being with someone that's got the skills as a very experienced property manager to be able to use the intuition rather than the rational mind to demonstrate the exercise. That's where the real skill is going to come in, I would have thought.
Yeah, gut feel plays a big role in what we do, and it's something you can't really be taught. You just got to learn over the period of time. And I think we're now reserving ourselves back to some some intellect and some experience in that process is helping us get a good outcome for our clients in our business. But we've seen a shift even to having to ring tenants back, not ring referees, but actually ring tenants and just have a chat with them and say, hey, look, I've got your application. It's missing this and it's missing that. But you seem like great people. You're very keen. You seem eager. You're easy to deal with. You're communicating really well, but we just need to fill in those gaps. And we're having phone interviews or even one-on-one meetings, getting them in the office and saying, hey, I just need to put this together. Can we fill in these gaps somehow? Let's just have a chat. Bit like a job interview. Sounds bizarre, sounds over the top. But when there's other parts of an application missing, if you can rely on that, that can be the difference between getting a really good tenant and obviously missing out on those opportunities.
Spot on. A very interesting environment that you're dealing with then. So again, sort of drawing that to a conclusion, what does all this mean for investors and landlords moving forward then, Brett?
I think, look, it's a super competitive market for tenants out there. And obviously, if you're in the process of trying to find a house to live, you're going to do anything and everything to get yourself across that line. So from a landlord's point of view, it's really important to be aware of the fact that going through this process and having a really in-depth knowledge of what it is that you need from a tenant, and being able to get that information from the tenant in a way that you're going to be able to be confident that you're getting the right tenant is really important. So I think tenant selection's always been really, really key, but I think it's going to be even more key going forward to make sure that you have the pool and the experience to get the best quality tenant, because the pool of tenants out there, unfortunately, it's not as good as what it's been in previous years.
Yeah.
Because we're going into a new marketplace where we have no rental history, we have no real financial history, we have language barriers that are making it harder to get this information. So we need to be even more careful with how we're doing this process, and we need to be thinking outside the square, I think, in getting the best result at the end of the day. But the good thing is, there's plenty of people out there looking. You just have to look probably and dig a little bit harder than what we're used to to make sure that you get the right fit, because it's not always just the application. It's about getting the right fit, the right tenant for the right property, for the right landlord. Every investor's different. They all have different expectations.
Yep.
And you don't want a relationship that's, going to be constantly heated. So it's really important to get that mix right.
Yeah, spot on. Look, love you clarifying exactly what's happening with tenant trends in the market, Brett, and it really does clearly highlight that while there's been a deluge of new arrivals, this is actually creating a raft of tenant application challenges and changes, given the obvious language barriers and the lack of local history you talked about. That's then, I guess, creating a lot of initial inquiry, but only eventuating in a very few actual suitable applicants. So it's clear that investor landlords need to be mindful and patient of this when it comes to securing a good tenant, and temper this against potentially false expectations that they've been created through the mainstream media. So thanks for joining all this. Thanks for sharing all this and joining us on the show again today, Brett.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Are you curious about harnessing your super for property investment? Propel your future with the enlightening online seminar, The Ultimate Masterclass to Self-Managed Super Fund Property Mastery. Reserve your spot now at getrare.com.au/SMSF. Spearheaded by Rusty from independent buyers agency Get Rare Properties, this masterclass unravels strategic property investment using your self-managed superannuation fund. It's not just about learning, it's about transforming your financial future through education. So embrace this opportunity to enrich your investing acumen. Enroll now in the free masterclass and begin a journey that marries insight with action, leading to a financially empowered tomorrow.
Unlock bonus content now as a premium subscriber.
Join us for more property news each week with Realty Talk, and get invested by subscribing to The Property Hub on all podcast players. Join the conversation on Facebook at The Property Hub Collective. Thanks to our supporters and content partners, realty.com.au, BMT Tax Depreciation, Know How Property Finance, Get Rare Property, and Apiro Marketing. Until next week, all the best.